Israel's military says it has taken full control of the strip of land that serves as a buffer zone between Gaza and Egypt. Israel says Hamas uses tunnels in the 14-kilometer-long Philedelphi Corridor to smuggle weapons from Egypt into Gaza. The Israeli military has stepped up its operations, meanwhile, in southern Gaza, despite international criticism over mounting civilian casualties in the city of Rafah. Israel's national security advisor says the offensive in Gaza is expected to go on at least until the end of the year. Here's Israeli Army spokesman Daniel Hagari addressing the latest developments in Gaza.
In recent days, IDF forces have taken operational control of the Philedelphi Corridor along the border between Egypt and Rafah. The Philedelphi Corridor served as an oxygen pipe for Hamas, through which it regularly transits weapons to the Gaza Strip.
And our Jerusalem correspondent Rebecca Ritters joins me now. Rebecca, Israel says it has taken control of the buffer zone between Gaza and Egypt. What does that mean for the situation on the ground?
Well, that's right. You just heard it there from the senior military spokesman, Daniel Hagari, saying that they had indeed taken control of that border region area known as the Philedelphi Corridor, that they had found some 20 tunnels, they say, along that border area. And they also found rocket launchers placed very close to the border, some just 10 to 40 metres, they say, from that border area. Hagari saying that Hamas were taking advantage of the proximity to the border in the knowledge that, or hope, I suppose, that Israel wouldn't bomb that region because it is just so close to the Egyptian border. Now, as you just heard there, Daniel Hagari saying that this had served as a Hamas oxygen pipeline, and that by securing this area, they have cut off the weapons supply that Hamas was still potentially maintaining and able to use. Now, they say that the Israeli military say that they have been updating Egypt on the developments, and we haven't heard a huge amount of reaction from Egypt yet, but certainly one source telling Egyptian media, one senior source, we're hearing that there are no truth in the statement about these tunnels. It's certainly going to be interesting to see how the Egyptians react to the news on this border region, given the peace agreement that is held between the two countries.
Yeah, how could this impact Israel's relationship with Egypt, you think?
Well, it's difficult to say at this stage, Nicole. Israel has been saying for some time that it has wanted to take control of this border region. It's something that Egypt hasn't been very keen to promote. Egypt has long been worried that there would be a Rafah incursion and that more military bombardment in that area would cause an influx of Palestinian refugees into Egypt. That's something that they were saying that they wouldn't do. In fact, on several occasions, Egypt has threatened to rip up the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. Now, that area along the border has been a demilitarized zone since the Camp David Accords of 1978, and since 2005 has been under Egyptian control. Before this Rafah invasion, though, we do know that an Israeli delegation went to Egypt, went to Cairo to discuss the operation with the Egyptian officials. So we don't know the details of those discussions, but it could be assumed that this operation and what the Israelis were planning was conferred to the Egyptians. So it's going to be interesting to see how Egypt balances domestic pressures. There's a lot of support for Palestinians within Egypt, so it's going to have a lot of domestic pressure from its populace there. And it balances also a peace treaty, which it benefits from by way of US aid. So, it's certainly going to be interesting to see just how Egypt react to this latest development. But at this stage, it's still too early to say.
You'll keep us updated on all the developments there. That was Rebecca Ritters in Jerusalem. Thank you so much. Michael Clark is a defense analyst and a visiting professor at King's College London. He joins us now. Michael, let's start with the latest. Israel claims to have taken full control of the Philedelphi Corridor, that buffer zone between Egypt and Gaza. What does that mean for the situation on the ground?
Well, it means they've achieved one of their tactical objectives. I mean, the corridor is about 11 kilometres long from the Israeli border up to the Mediterranean coast. And they always knew that they would have to take control of this corridor because lots of smuggling goes on. It's full of tunnels. The Egyptians claim that they've prevented all of the tunnels from working, that they've blocked them or they've intercepted them. But nobody believes that. A lot of tunnels still exist. And so it was always the case that the Israelis, from a tactical point of view, had to drive their own forces all the way along the southern Gaza border in order to seal the border themselves. And that will create a certain amount of tension with the Egyptians just on the other side of the border. But it means from their military point of view, they can now try to work through their policy in Rafah, that they've now reached the centre of Rafah and will push on towards, I think, Al-Mawasi on the coast, which is designated as a safe area.
Israel and the U.S. are still calling the Rafah offensive limited. What would an all-out offensive look like then?
Well, I think an all-out offensive would look pretty much like what they're doing, to be honest. It's hard to see in what way this offensive is limited because they moved 5 brigades. They created 2 divisions, the 162nd and the 98th Airborne Division, for this phase of the operation. And they put the 98th Division to the north, and they mobilized out of 13 brigades. There were 2 big divisions. Out of 13 brigades, they mobilized 10 of them. 5 brigades have gone to the north, 5 brigades are working in the south, and they're pushing as fast as they can. And so they moved into the eastern outskirts, then into the centre of Rafah, and now they'll move to the west. And they're bombing as they go whenever they see targets. So, they were bombing yesterday at the Tal Al, a couple of days ago at the Tal Al Sultan area, the tented area, because they felt that they had 2 particular terrorists, 2 Hamas people, Yazin Rabia and Khalid Nagar. They thought they had them, so they went after them, regardless of the civilian casualties that caused. So, to be honest, I can't see any difference between what they're doing now and an all-out offensive.
Yeah, I want to talk about that attack a little later, but first I want to bring up something that Israeli officials announced today. They said that the war in Gaza will go on at least until the end of the year. Why so long, and what shape could that take?
I can't tell you what shape it will take because the whole thing is becoming coherent. From a military point of view, I'm a military analyst, I cannot tell you what the strategy is. I cannot see a coherent strategy in what the IDF are doing. All that they know is that they have to say it will take some more time because they don't know what to do next. The strategy, in effect, is going round in circles. They were told to destroy Hamas, which they cannot do. They can dismantle Hamas's physical presence and they can kill quite a lot of Hamas people, but they're probably creating more Hamas people than they are killing just by their actions. And the policy seems to lack any coherence. So, for instance, at Christmas in December, they had 20 brigades across Gaza, 20 brigades. They rapidly reduced that down to 5 brigades, then 1 brigade. Now they've gone back to 10 brigades within a month. And I cannot give you a sensible rationale as to why they did that, because they've cleared the area, say, from Khan Yunis. They cleared it, they withdrew. Now they've gone back into Khan Yunis because Hamas keep popping up there. The same with Jabalia. They've cleared the Jabalia refugee camp, and now they're going back in for a 3rd time because Hamas keep popping up. So there is no military coherence to this strategy. And the IDF, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, basically said that last week. He said, unless we are given a proper political construct from the government, meaning Netanyahu, unless you tell us what the day after is supposed to look like, we cannot pursue a sensible strategy which delivers that. That's the problem that they've got.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned the lack of a plan for the day after, I want to bring up something the U.S. Secretary of State said, because he talked about that again, which has been a point of contention. Let's listen into what he had to say.
In the absence of a plan for the day after, there won't be a day after. A plan for the day after that does not leave Israel responsible for Gaza, which it says it does not want to be. But if it is, it will simply have an enduring insurgency on its hands for as far as one can see into the future. Or not, if not, Hamas will be left in charge, which is unacceptable. Or if not, we'll have chaos, lawlessness, and a vacuum that eventually will be filled again by Hamas, or maybe something, if it's possible to imagine, even worse.
Michael, you say the military operation at this point looks incoherent to you. Do you have any idea what Israel's long-term strategy could be?
No, I mean, most people who have looked at this say, look, the day after, and Antony Blinken there was expressing, I think, his exasperation and frustration at all of this. We know that to move forward, somehow, we've got to start to think about the Palestinian people as a whole, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank. There has to be a new deal for the Palestinians. We know that the two-state solution is dead, but we all have to go and revisit the corpse and pretend that it isn't dead in order to try to create something out of the fact that two groups of people, about 10 million each, both want to live in the same part of the world. So that suggests that something like a two-state solution will have to emerge, even whatever we turn out to call it. And we can't get even to the beginning of that conversation until the military operation is at an end and Hamas is replaced by something else. So at the moment, we all know what the ingredients are, and those ingredients are waiting for us at square one, let's say, but we can't even get to square one because the Israeli government won't anticipate or won't talk about what the day after might look like, but they have to. And the reason they won't talk about it, of course, is because a lot of this crisis is concerned with the political survival of Benjamin Netanyahu, and because he's got the ultra-right wing on one side, and he's got people like Benny Gantz and Yoav Gallant on the other, who are pragmatists, and I wouldn't have called them pragmatists a few months ago, but they are now. And he is struggling to stay in power at almost any cost. And so he will not make a decision on what the day after looks like. And so while he refuses to make a decision, this whole crisis just keeps going round in circles, and we can't even get started on what the political process might look like. And there's any number of people trying to work it out. The Americans are putting a lot of effort in, the Qataris are, the Saudis are, the Europeans are. Everyone is trying to think about what the next stage might look like, but we can't even get to the starting point.
Yeah, and it looks like right now we are stuck with a dramatic situation in Rafah, a huge international outcry after that attack on a tent camp over the weekend. Still, the U.S. insists the current operation is not crossing any red lines. Do you think there is a red line for the Biden administration?
Well, there may not be. One understands Joe Biden's problems because, he needs this whole crisis like a hole in the head during an election year. This is the worst possible thing that could have happened to him when he's fighting an election in November. And so he has to be very careful. He's trying to bring pressure on Netanyahu by all means he can without cutting off final support to Israel. If he cuts off that support, then he will do himself a great deal of political damage in the United States. But he's tried everything he can, and Netanyahu keeps telling him that Israel will be restrained, and then just ignoring what he's said. And I think the relationship between Netanyahu and Biden is about as low as it could possibly be in reality. We thought relations between Netanyahu and Obama couldn't get any worse. But I think that President Biden must be so angry with Netanyahu because Netanyahu will not stick to any deal he makes over the telephone as to what he will or won't do, because he's fighting for his political life. And the first slip that Netanyahu makes, he will be out of power. There'll be an election. He will lose the election and be back in court on corruption charges.
That was defense analyst Michael Clark. Excellent speaking to you. Thank you so much for making the time.
Pleasure.